Hello, welcome to this week's episode of What One Thing AI, one business, one problem, one AI solution implemented, which we hope will inspire you to take AI action. I'm Hayley Baxter.
And I'm Phil Davenport, and today we have the pleasure of talking to Ewan Reid. Ewan's the head of Utilis, who are based in Amsterdam, been in business for over 21 years with 6.5 full-time employees. They support expanding businesses across Europe. Now, Ewan is a self-proclaimed non-academical, never been into theory, but he does like hands-on practical solutions. And certainly as an IT support provider, it requires knowledge across many subjects. The best way for him to learn was by building test environments, breaking them, testing and rebuilding them. He can now speak 2 foreign languages, but failed his French exam at school. He says throw him in at the deep end and he'll learn to swim. So Ewan, I'd love to know, what was the issue that you got AI to help you with?
Effectively the issue itself was AI and kind of the hype around it all. There's so much in the last few years since it's come out. Where do you start effectively? And it was very obvious from the beginning that this would be a kind of a polar shift to doing things in a different way, which is fantastic. But the problem is there were so many opportunities and possibilities with what you could actually do with AI. A lot of it was possibly hype. These days maybe we know a little bit better, but it was really the how do we begin the adoption of AI? How do we begin bringing that into our daily processes, our operations, everything? And with a lot of these things that certainly I've come across in my career as an IT guy, MSP owner, take a smaller subject, a subset, whatever, and take a bite out of that first. And that's very important, I think, because it stops you going off on tangents. Not that I'm one that goes off on tangents, Phil, as you know. I'm very, very driven. I think as IT people, we do tend to go off on tangents, and as business owners as well. I don't think it's just IT people. I think it's business owners. So we essentially looked at it. We did a little bit of team brainstorming, and we kind of found the thing that was giving the most pain, kind of the highest pain point level as it was. And then took all those things and kind of cross-referenced them against what would give us our biggest win, not just for internally, not just for Utilis, but also for our clients and the other people we work with to service clients. And that was essentially, we came down with documentation, and included in the documentation you obviously have standard operating procedures, checklists, etc., because they really drive efficiency and consistency within your business.
That's a phenomenal answer that I think so many small business owners are 100% feeling right now. That they're aware of AI, they're aware of words like it's a polar shift, but at the same time they've no idea what to actually do on a practical basis other than maybe buy somebody's tools who's advertising on LinkedIn. What are your thoughts on that, Hayley?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a complete minefield. And I loved how you said, Ewan, that like anything, it's best to just break it down and chunk it for where you start. And the other thing that I loved about what you said is that you involved your team in that process as well. Because I think you often hear that there's a bit of fear around introducing AI procedures into businesses because that will impact the workforce in a negative way. But I think what's great about what you're sharing today is how it's impacted your team positively.
That's fantastic. So to summarise, you've sat down, you've brainstormed with the team, what are our big problems? And let's be honest, there's books, traction, systemization, there's hundreds of kind of business coaches and things like that, and all of them point towards how we get this systemized documentation in place, and that was the decision you came up with. Talk me through on a real basic level the steps that you then went through to overcome this challenge.
Yeah, that's a well-formed question there, and I love the talk me through on a basic level, because as a geek, I'm probably going to go too deep into it, so just give me a timeout when you do need to. We first started looking at the actual tools that were available, and at the time that was we had ChatGPT, which was kind of the starting point of it all, wasn't it? Claude from Anthropic. I'm not actually sure if Gemini from Google was around at that time, because we're talking almost 2 years ago now. So we looked really at the tools, and some other ones as well, less well known ones. We looked at the tools that were available. There were already some kind of startups kicking off that would say, oh yeah, we can do this for your documentation and your procedures, etc., etc. So we did look at off-the-shelf solutions, but because of where the whole AI revolution was at that point, it was very much in its infancy. Those tools were really, for me, certainly very much a cash grab. So after a good bit of deliberation, we decided on ChatGPT, which we're still, to be honest, quite happy with. With ChatGPT, there were various stages in its life. Obviously, it became fairly mature from a point of view actually being able to use it for business fairly rapidly from where it started off. I think the big thing for us was when you could actually create projects within ChatGPT, which are essentially, you can call it what you want, like a folder in your SharePoint where you put everything about that particular subject into. The nice thing about projects is you can basically define them and teach them. So you can say this project is about doing a podcast on AI adoption in small businesses, and then you plug in your ideas, you plug in some PDFs you've got from somewhere else. It's already got that source material, and that's one of the very important things I think when you're working with any sort of AI. Giving it good, high-quality subject material is very important. You get out of it what you put into it very much effort-wise. And also, you have to be yourself somewhat of an expert. You can't just rely on the whole AI side. So with projects, yeah, you can fill it up with the content to give it the idea of where you want to go. And within projects, you have something probably getting geeky now, called instruction blocks. And instruction blocks essentially allow you to really define your project and where you want to go, and almost build it so that it's going to be prompting you to do specific things. It's going to trigger you. So we wrote some nice instruction blocks, we played around with them, we worked out which ones were the best, and we came up essentially with a project, a solution that we could push out across all our team members, because everybody does documentation at Utilis, whether they like it or not. Point being, the team actually do really like doing them now. So we push that out across the whole team. And when they're working on something, they go into that particular project, they say what they want to say, they give it all the extra details that it might need on that particular subject that you're wanting to write documentation or standard procedures over. And at the end of it, it'll pop up and say, hey, do you want me to give you this in the documentation format that you can grab and throw into our documentation platform, IT Glue, basically cut, paste, and it's all in what's called HTML format. So it all comes out beautifully with our banner, our logo banner, all our branding, corporate branding. So we've got the right colours, the right fonts. Yeah, that's essentially how we did it without getting too technical, hopefully.
Might be a silly question. The projects side of ChatGPT are different than the agent piece. It's a different element of ChatGPT. Is that right? Have I understood that correctly?
Projects, you can liken. Okay, so you have the chat where you can just open up ChatGPT and throw in whichever question you have, and that's obviously much broader. It's not specific to anything that you've worked on before, possibly. The projects themselves are, I would say essentially, if you think about, you have a folder on your server or in your SharePoint, and you have all the data, all the content about subject X, doing the tax return for the end of the year, for example. You have that folder there, that's where you've got all your documentation, etc. And that's where you store it all. So projects are very much similar, I think, to folders, I would say.
Okay.
The thing with the projects is it's on steroids, because the project, when you start, you can't prompt a SharePoint folder or a folder on your server or in your OneDrive. You can't prompt a project, and it's through exactly the same chat where you just put in your normal chat. It's just you're in an actual project itself. So as soon as you go into that subject, you know that you're going to be talking about this overall subject as it was, and you can get more specific per chat itself.
Okay. And how, so again, as like a non-techie person that I am, the thing that I would be worried about would be the security of that within ChatGPT. How do you deal with that, or how do you get comfortable that the information you're putting in there is secure? Yeah,
we pay for ChatGPT, quite simply. I think there is a way with ChatGPT to say don't use any content that I upload with the free version. However, I'm not sure how all-encompassing that is. So with ChatGPT, pretty much, I believe all the paid versions you can specifically check or uncheck the box that says, do or don't share any data that's uploaded to ChatGPT. We get this question quite a lot, to be honest with you, and I do understand it. I think it's a valid point. The way I answer it is, with the move to the cloud especially, it makes it easier to answer. Because at the moment, if you're using Google Docs or you're using Microsoft 365 to store all your data, you're already giving it to a third party. You're already trusting that third party that they're not going to dip into your data and start pulling things out. I think that the larger fear with ChatGPT and AIs in general is that they do use your data for learning purposes. However, with a paid version, you can specifically opt out of that.
I really like this. How tricky, because I'm just thinking about the actual use case for what you've built here, Ewan. To me, if I had a salesperson, I could tell them to put all of the details of their proposal into a project, and it would brand it, it would put it into the same format. It would mean that we could standardise proposals, the same with project plans. I mean, it feels like it's a real far-reaching concept that you've come up with here. So am I correct in saying that your staff will put kind of their words, if you will do, of how to document something, and then you're using the power of GPT to standardise that and to put it into the same format for everybody?
Yes, and I think that's a really important distinction when you say their own words. One of my pet hates with AI is that people ask a question and then say, "Oh, can you give me a one-pager on this, please?" Because there's nothing of them in there. So they're going to get stuff. We know, AIs, they do hallucinate. They will make things up. You have to be knowledgeable to a certain extent on the subject before you can actually ask it to write your documentation for you. I think write your documentation is probably actually the wrong words to use. It assists you with the formatting, the overall look and feel. It will point out to you, for example, if you have written up something yourself that doesn't quite fit into the proper way we do things within the team. So you definitely need to put quite a lot of yourself in there and get the knowledge. And the other thing with ChatGPT, it's kind of Googling on steroids as well. What I find myself doing, probably too much, I tend to go down rabbit holes, as you know, Phil. But quite often I will say but I think this because I've seen this. And by the way, here's an article about it. And ChatGPT will go and look and I'll say, well, that's fair enough, and you're kind of like 80% right there, but there's also this 20%. So I'm actually also learning from kind of like sparring sessions with ChatGPT, which is always fun, especially once you've cracked a bottle of wine open on a Saturday afternoon or whatever. It's
talk to me about how the team has found this standardisation of documentation. What's the kind of feedback you've got from them? And how easy would this be to set up if you were less technically inclined than yourself?
The team have definitely responded very well to it. I actually wrote documentation about how to set up projects, etc. in our format. And I use ChatGPT to do it. So it's kind of inception side of things. The team do love it because they can literally crack out 3-4 documentation in the time it would take them maybe to write one. So they're much more efficient. We've got much less. What I see when we're doing our ticket reviews, our support ticket reviews, is there's much less. Oh yeah, I still need to write a documentation about that. Because they've actually, instead of saying, okay, I'm finished with that, I've got to jump onto this other ticket now, they're taking the time, they're stepping back and they're saying, I do need to jump onto that next issue. However, it's not world-threatening, world-shattering. I'm going to take the time to write the documentation, essentially grab their notes from the ticket resolution. They can throw it into ChatGPT, they can give it an idea of what's going on, and from there they're getting their documentation. So they're maybe 5 or 10 minutes busy writing a documentation, and that's it, they're done. Whereas before it was always kind of like it's building up, and we were leaving stuff on the on the table. We're definitely leaving value on the table because things certain and they happen again and they happen again and they happen again. It's a complete pet hate of mine. If it happens once, that's once too many. It should happen once at the very most, and you should write a documentation on it, and then you've got it for the next time. And then you can also look at your procedures and say, okay, we've got the documentation, but actually if we fix this as a procedure from 10 steps back, we're not going to really need the documentation because we're never going to have that issue. So that's great for the team. It's great for the clients as well. So the team really, really love the whole system, and I can see it just in our documentation. There's many more that are now with the little green flag that we put on them to say these are up to date in the proper format. We've gone from, maybe 35% the beginning of this year to probably way above the 70-80%. We're doing another review at the moment. And I forgot the second part to your question, sorry. It was about the team and it was about...
How easy would this be to implement for us? Because, I mean, who doesn't want to improve their documentation and standardise their business?
Honestly, you would not have to be particularly... I'm probably shooting myself in the foot here.
That shoots himself in the foot for any of our non-Scottish listeners.
It should not be too difficult. You definitely need a certain level of technical knowledge of how to get into ChatGPT and create projects, but there's enough ChatGPT documentation itself, or Claude or whatever else. There's enough information in the standard knowledge base help article to set it up. I mean, obviously, as an MSP, it's something that we'll just include in our service offering to clients. You know, we're quite happy to show you once, and you go off and do it again. If they keep coming back all the time, then yes, it becomes a project. And that's fine as well, but certainly that's something we're going to start including because we want to test it ourselves as well. That happens quite often with over the years, 21 years, you learn a few things. I liken it a little bit to when I was a youngster and they came out with ABS or airbags in cars. Your little Fiat Punto or whatever they're called, your little car didn't have the airbags, it didn't have the ABS. When it first came out, 5 years down the road, 6 years, 10 years down the road, it did start coming in. And that's because, the car manufacturers, they were innovating, they're testing it, they're putting in their bigger models because they can do it properly because they've got the money, they've got the cash to be able to do that. And I think that's really a lot of what I've done over the years as well. Go out, test it on myself, make sure it's working, okay, roll it out to the team, see what they think about it. If it's working well for us, then we can say, okay, is this going to fit for our clients? Or is this just like totally IT MSP only? They never need to know about it. I would say generally probably way above the 70-80%. Most of the stuff we do, we try and bring that at least to their attention, whether or not they implement an entire system, because it's something we use. But that's definitely, my feeling with this is this is definitely something that every business can benefit from. Who wouldn't benefit from better documentation?
What a brilliant summarisation of Ewan. I think he did brilliantly to keep that at what I would call a low-level tech chat, although I could see he was chomping at the bit to get into the nitty-gritty. What did you take away from that, Hayley?
I think there are quite a few different things. The biggest thing is that rather than utilising an off-the-shelf product with a price point attached to it, actually just utilising ChatGPT that most people have in their businesses anyway nowadays, to use it to its full potential. And I think that leads on to quite often what happens with many IT softwares is that we get them, we kind of like scratch the surface with them, but we don't really understand them properly and use them to their full potential. So I think that was quite a big takeaway from me. And the other thing that I think was really interesting was that how actually to do it was relatively straightforward. It wasn't a huge amount of time invested to do it. When you consider how long it takes to write procedure, it would take me a month to write one procedure because I'd start it and then I'd get bored and then I would forget what I was doing and then I'd come back to it 3 weeks later and it would just never get finished. But then also how you can use ChatGPT or AI, we shouldn't just say ChatGPT, but the AI products to help you, to guide you through the process of what you need to do. I think that's really quite cool as well. What about you?
Yeah, I love that point. I hadn't really thought about that feedback loop because the purpose of AI is that it's able to give you some feedback as you're progressing through. For me, one of the things that we all as business owners, we struggle to get each proposal to follow the same format, even to the extent of our onboarding calls with customers and our first time appointments with customers to see if we think we're going to be a good fit. But what Ewan's unlocked there is an opportunity to be able to produce a document quite easily and quickly, whether that is internal documentation or whether it's to say, hey Hayley, thanks for that first meeting, really enjoyed our time together. We picked up which is what we're currently kind of using Fixer AI for, and to a certain extent Copilot for, to do a transcription of meetings. But it feels like Ewan's then taken that on to the next level where you can take a transcription of issues that have been resolved or of meetings, and put that into your own branded documentation to really make it stand out, be a bit more punchy, but mainly to really standardise it down.
Yeah, and I think that, taking a leap forward with that point, if you're a business that's looking to scale, having that process down in that way where you've got the team on board and doing it for you, and they've embraced it and they're using it, that's like a massive leap forward. Like one of the, there are various things that I believe you need to have in place before you can scale a business, and one of them most definitely is documented processes and procedures. So being able to utilise the AI software to do that, that's just, making a whole chunk of work a whole lot easier for those businesses.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, how many times do we see that, I've got a coach in, what's the coach recommended? The coach has recommended that we start by systemising and noting down our processes, procedures. And again, it's a very lonely place as a business owner often, because you feel like you're doing that on your own. And as I think Ewan alluded to, staff are often quite kind of scared of documenting things, because they feel that it might affect their role. If they document it, it's no longer in their head, and they're no longer as valuable to you as an employee. I think the beauty of it is that we explain to our staff that we're doing it so that they can be on higher level jobs, and so that we can standardise those boring jobs and hopefully take away those boring things from them and give it to either AI in the future or another employee with less experience, so that they can move on to pastures more exciting, should we say.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does, and that, the business benefit of that is it does reduce that key person, where you've got one person that knows how to do one thing and you rely on that person to do it, which as small businesses, we all get into that situation. And that's definitely a growing pain of businesses. So embracing this early on in that journey, or even if you're not early on in that journey, embracing it moving forwards, it's only going to bring you benefit, isn't it?
Absolutely. Best time to plant a tree 20 years ago, second best time today.
Thanks so much for joining us. We hope you found one thing to help move your business forward.
And if you did, please do us a favour, share this episode with someone else who's on the same journey, and we'll see you next time on What One Thing AI.